Okie dokie. So this is clip number 3. And basically all I did was I wrote down your chapters, which we're covering, or I plan to cover. And what I suggest, and this is just how I would pick them, is here are the key words that I would use. I wrote them down. That make for excellent essay topics, or excellent exactly. Anytime you can basically find something that involves scams, manipulation, scandals, Bill Clinton, right? Scandals, gotta love them. Actually, it's funny because I actually have this book I got recently from Webster Tarpley, actually, and he argues that Barack Obama was like the absolute worst choice, Democratic Party, and that Hillary was much better choice. Was basically his thesis. Although he generally is kind of critical of pretty much every politician. But anyway, so there you go. So you got scandals with the Clintons, and of course there's tons of scandals. I mean, American politics is just scandal after scandal after scandal. You know, that's pretty much all it is. You know, before the Clintons, you had the Reagan era with the Iran-Contra affair. I mean, you had the whole JFK assassination in the 60s, Vietnam also in the 60s, the Gulf of Tonkin scandal. I mean, it's just scandal after scandal. Anyway, or anything that involves exposing corruption, cover-ups, anything like that always makes for great topics. They're fascinating, they're interesting, they're not just, you know, you want to avoid sort of a descriptive approach to writing essays. You're just sort of telling me what's going on. You know, this is what happened, blah blah blah. A better and more interesting essay is when you have some sort of thesis where you're trying to expose something or to make certain controversial points. It is perfectly acceptable to be controversial, or in my notes are be a contrarian. Yes. Okay. So scams, manipulation, cover-ups, anything that sounds like, I know, you're taking down some big institution or some important person, and so that makes for interesting reading. Okay. Okay. So here's the content. Chapter 2. Chapter 2, of course, talks about unemployment, inflation, and so on. Okay, first thing you could do is look into how inflation numbers are computed. Okay, it's called the, what the heck do they call it? Not hegemony, that's not the right word. Hedonic, that's the one, the other one. There's all these H words. Hedonic pricing. There's an interesting little controversy in economics about is sort of how we measure inflation. It's sort of like a cover-up. It's to make the statistics not look as bad as they really are. And same thing with unemployment. Unemployment numbers, oh man, very controversial about how unemployment figures are measured. Lots of allegations of suppression of unemployment numbers to keep them looking really low so politicians can get reelected. So that could be an interesting topic there. It's just measurement of key macroeconomic variables of inflation, unemployment, and all the controversies surrounding it. Right? In one of my other movies, I mentioned there's like 8 different ways they measure unemployment. R1 through R8. So what, you know, right off the bat, we have an issue of, okay, why are there 8 different measures? What's going on there? Maybe it's not so controversial. Maybe it's completely justified. Maybe I'm being paranoid. I'm, you know, exactly going off the deep end here. Well, that's fine, but you should investigate it. Don't just take it for granted. So unemployment numbers, I mentioned the inflation numbers, so the question of hedonic pricing, that's an interesting issue as well. You can look at that. You could ask yourself, of course, I mentioned this in class, why did the American Central Bank stop publishing the M3 money supply numbers, which is a measure of The money supply. It's a broad measure. You know, well, the hint is that rapid growth rates of money lead to rapid growth rates in prices, or inflation. And of course, inflation has a lot of nasty effects. I mean, you could do another thing. What are the implications on the average person of a hyperinflation? Right? Basically, the story is it wipes out the middle class, destroys all their savings, and turns them all into paupers, which makes them easily manipulated tools. So there could be something a little more nefarious. Remember, what I cite in one of my other movies is that they talked about this in German history. The army was really happy to see hyperinflation, so we could start another war. I cite that in one of my movies. So there could be other more nefarious reasons to why inflation. So pick something nefarious, something scandalous, and you'll be fine. So that's that. All right. So you could argue, maybe your thesis is, the reason the Federal Reserve is not publishing the M3 statistics is because they're trying to cover something up. And what are they covering up? And then that becomes your investigation. And then you write a report on that. What did you find? Maybe you're going to claim that the press releases from the Federal Reserve are not telling us the full truth. They're propaganda. That's a radical thesis. But why not? So, it's propaganda. Why? What's really going on? What is Bubbles Greenspan and Helicopter Bernanke really up to? And that Paulson guy. What is he really doing? Don't believe them at face value, what they say in their press reports. Okay? And then you will dig it up. Why not? Chapter 3. Okay. This is very interesting. I was thinking about, and this is really controversial, but what the hell? Here's a book. Called Cocaine Politics. And it's by Peter Dale Scott, is the primary author, who's a professor, University of California in Berkeley. It's got all the great stuff. It really, your textbook sort of presents a thesis that, business is bad if it's not regulated by governments. That's the thesis, right? We need lots of government to sort of keep business honest. Well, this book is basically saying that governments are 10,000 times more corrupt than big business, basically. So you can't, it's basically saying that you can't put government in charge of regulating business if they're the ones who are 10 times worse. It involves money laundering of drug money. You've got the whole Iran-Contra affair, which basically involved illegal arms sales to raise money so that they could secretly, covertly fund this sort of revolutionary group down in Nicaragua to overthrow the government. They were called the Contras. That was during the Reagan administration. Good old Oliver North. Cool stuff. So he talks about these banks involved in laundering of money. I remember talking about when I was in fourth year economics. He talked about money laundering and stuff like this, and international drug trafficking. So it's not like it's some illegitimate topic. I was a fourth year undergraduate. I was in fourth year economics, and I remember we talked about that, and I laughed my face off when he started talking about this. But it's a valid issue, So maybe you were a little crazier up at York or something. I don't know. Anyway, so there you go. There's your thesis. The government should not be the one in charge of regulating business because they're 10,000 times more corrupt than any private business ever could be. And so turn your textbook's thesis on its head and say, wrong, we can't go this route. There you go. Challenge the whole question of regulations. Why not?